Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Flake webinar. So this is our second webinar of 2021, and today we'll be covering hiring and availability. The first half of the webinar today will be covering hiring, and Emily will be taking that section, and then I'll follow up with the availability feature after that, and we'll finish up with QA. So with that, thanks so much for joining, and I'll send it over to you, Emily, to cover hiring.
Thanks. Cool. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, so we're going to cover the Flake hiring feature today. I'm going to kind of show you where that is. So it's going to be over in this toolbar over here. You're going to be able to kind of pull it out, and underneath the staff management section, you're going to find the hiring section and be able to navigate to each one of the tabs within that section from here. So I'm just gonna kind of show you through the tabs first. So the first tab that we have is our jobs tab here. This is where you're gonna set up your job groups. You're gonna be able to keep track of your potential candidates, and as they move through the hiring process, you can see who's accepted jobs and lots of other information there. I'm going to show you the other hiring tabs real quick too. So we also have the offers tab. This is where you're going to make your offers, and you're going to move them through the process of sending them out, and you're going to be able to also view the people that have declined and accepted the offers. And then we're also going to have our talent pools section. So the talent pool is where your candidates are going to be stored. So if you've used Flake before, at the end of each season, there is a step that your account holder will do to sort staff into the new season. And generally, staff are sorted into this talent pool section for hiring for the next season. If you notice that there's not really any people in this talent pool section and you're having trouble setting stuff up, it might be that your account holder hasn't done the staff sort yet from the previous season. And in that case, the best thing to do is kind of go over to the settings section in the general settings. You can take a look at who your account holder is for your resort, get in contact with them, and check if they've done the staff sort for the season. All right, so flipping back over to the talent pool, this is also going to be where you can add new candidates to the system. So people that haven't been in Flake before, new hires from outside. So there are two different kind of ways to go about doing this. You can either add one candidate at a time. So that's a single candidate. You can fill out the fields with the stars. We do also recommend that you kind of put in as much of this information as you have. Hiring is a really great way to get data into the system for your instructors. It's kind of at the beginning of the season. There's a lot of different fields here. And so we do recommend that everybody, even if you're not sending offers, does go through the hiring process just to get all this information in the system for your instructors. So you can either put a bunch of information in. There is a form to be able to do a more simple version of that. And then you can also update candidates or input candidates in bulk. So we have a simple and a comprehensive template that you can download here into your spreadsheet system, and you can put in the relevant information for each one of your new hires and upload them into the talent pool here to be able to send out offers and do tracking and stuff like that. Okay, so this is the talent pool section again. It's very similar to staff management if you're familiar with Flake. It's basically just a really great way to be able to see a lot of information on your instructors, on your potential candidates all at once. So just to give you a little tour around this section, we have our filters here. You can use filters to sort of limit the view of how many people you're seeing in the talent pool at once if you're doing some updating work. So you can filter by the job group that they're in. That's the first page I showed you. The hire type, either returning or new staff, the candidate level, staff groups, disciplines, a couple different options here. And then you also have this sort feature over here. That's going to allow you to sort by any of the columns that you've pulled into this giant kind of like pool here. So you're going to be able to kind of sort by ascending or descending order. And then this little gear is going to allow you to bring in different columns. So I've picked a couple here that are pretty typically used in the hiring process, but we also have a lot here that you can kind of pick in the sidebar. So you're going to need to delete one of your columns to be able to pick a new one. but we have columns from previous employment. So this is the employment from last season. We also have job offer information here. We have hiring type and email address as well. So you can kind of pull in that information to kind of take a look while you're doing this section. Another thing that you can do in this section is that you can actually download some previous employment information. So if you have a bunch of returning staff in here from last season and you'd like to be able to pull out the employment data from last season into a spreadsheet to be able to pull that out and kind of bulk update other parts of the system, you're going to be able to do that here and then upload through the bulk update candidates section. You can also archive people from here. So if you've pulled everybody over from the last season and you actually know like, oh, hey, Eddie is not going to be able to make it this season, you can just send him straight to the archive from here and you can pull him in next season if he's coming back. All right. A couple other things within this section as well. You can always remove someone from a group or you can attach them to a group. So if you have someone that's not attached to a group, this little attach button is going to show up, or you can remove them from the current job group that they're in. You can also email candidates out of Flaik. So you can email a couple people at a time or just one individually and select a no reply or allow reply option. There are a lot of different places in Flaik that you'll see this email candidate or message instructor button. So cool, that's kind of the talent pool section. We'll come back here in a little bit. I'm going to show you more on the bulk update candidates side of things, but let's flip back to the job section and create some job groups. So here I have laid out just a couple of the ways that people tend to use the job group. So a lot of people will split it up by discipline, primary discipline, and the commitment level. So you'll see here that we have ski full-time, ski part-time. Other people will do it based on rehire versus new hire. So they'll have their snowboard rehires, maybe even snowboard rehires full-time. And then they'll have their new hires kind of separated out so they can keep track of the numbers separately. You can see that as people accept their offers, this little ticker is going to sort of go up. So it's a great way to keep track of your numbers. You can also use this little flip around tool here. You can view how many of the offers have been sent, how many of them have been viewed, declined, and accepted. So just a really quick way to get kind of an insight into your hiring process. You're going to notice a couple different colors here. So we have the open, pending, and closed. So that's referring to whether your groups are kind of active. So there is a feature within here where you can set up automated, like send out the job offers automatically as soon as they're ready, or you can do it as a manual process. So the pending is just going to prevent you from accidentally automatically sending out those offers. All you need to do to change something from pending is select the job type, and you're going to go over here to the open job section and just open it on up. Okay, I'm going to show you how to create a job group. So we're going to open this little screen here. We're going to put in, let's see, part-time tele. There are a couple different sections here, fields that you do need to fill out. Those are marked with a star. So you're going to have the job process name, the positions required, and the default job title. There are also a couple of optional fields here as well. So employment type, as I said, a lot of people do like to kind of separate out their job groups by employment types to keep track of numbers. So we're going to do part-time here. Discipline, you can select from our disciplines list. Hire type. So this is really one to consider whether or not you want to put on, because sometimes you're going to have a mix of both in each of your job groups, but we'll leave that one blank. And we're going to put positions required. I'll just put in 10. And then the default job title, this is going to be instructor. You might be wondering where this information is coming from that's found in these drop downs, and that's all made in the admin settings. So these are custom made employment types and job titles that you'll make in the back end of the system. Okay, it's going to give you a little bit of information on just recommended setup, other things people have done in the past. You can click next here. This is going to be the email that actually goes out to your staff when you're sending them a job offer. So this is going to be the email they get in their inbox. You have a lot of customization options here. We have a couple mail merge field, so you can quickly add fields that are going to pull in information that's relevant to the specific instructor that you're emailing. This is an editable field. The subject line is not currently editable. It has to do with some spam rules, but it's just going to say your job offer from the resort. And down here, we're going to have our test field. So this is a great way to test the email after you kind of work on the body of the email a little bit and just make sure everything's looking good. You also have this preview page here. So this is going to allow you to see what the offer is going to look like to your staff in both desktop and a mobile phone view. All right, down over here in this section, this is really important. Make sure not to miss this. This is going to be where you choose how these offers go out. So if you'd like to send all of your offers manually from the offers tab that I showed you a little bit before, make sure to mark this manual for each one of your job groups. You can also send out on a specific date. So you can select the date that you'd like to send all of your job offers and just line them up and have them ready to go. Or you can select when ready, and that's just going to say, when you select or when you finalize your offer, it's just going to automatically send it out for you. Okay. The next page is going to be the actual job offer. So this is going to be after they click the button in their email, they're going to go to a Flaik web page, and it's going to have the job offer details for that particular instructor here. Again, we have some mail merge fields that you can pull into this template, and this one has automatically put in sort of the different employment, the different wages that we have, the employment type, the job title, and a couple of different places for name and resort. If you don't want to show these wages in the actual offer, or perhaps you don't use all of the wages, you can just delete those, and that information is not going to be shown in this section. So again, we have a preview page that's going to help make it really easy to see what this is going to look like. I do recommend actually in this section that if you often have people that like to change their commitment levels from season to season, maybe you're doing a send to a bunch of rehires, put some instructions here that say to get in touch with you if they would like to change their commitment level. It's just a little bit easier to have them get in touch and to pull them out of that group and put them in another one than it is if they accept the offer and then you need to change the group later. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into a further section, but there's really kind of two options there. You can either tell them to reach out to your contact to let them know, and then they can switch their group, or you can ask them to decline. There's also a little space when you decline to put in a note, and they can say, I'd like to actually be full-time. All right, the next page is going to be for reminders. So this is a pretty standardized template within Flaik. There's no editability here, but it's just going to remind your instructors that, hey, like, we sent you a job offer, please respond. And you can pick how many of those reminders that you want to send and how frequently. So you can actually disable this feature if you'd like to do it individually. From the offer screen, there's a place where you can send reminders manually, but you could set it for a couple of days, and then you can set a maximum number of reminders per week. And again, you can test this email here as well. Okay. So now that you've set up your job groups, you're going to want to put your instructors into the groups. So you can select one of the jobs here, and you can hit this little tool that says attach candidates. So anytime you see a kind of gray box around the filters, it means you have some filters already set up. So I'm just going to hit reset. Now I'm going to see all of my potential candidates for this job, people that haven't already been assigned to a job group. I can pick a couple based on their discipline and kind of put them in the job group. One more thing I want to point out is that you do have the ability to duplicate job groups here. So if you have a lot of similarity, say between your part-time ski and snowboard, you can just make your job a little bit easier, duplicate that group and change the title of it. I want to point out that you can also email candidates from this screen as well, and you have tools to be able to view the offers that you've sent for a particular job group. You can also archive job groups and delete job groups that you're not using anymore. If you do archive job groups, you're going to want to go to the filters. You can select this archived little box here, and that's going to pull in any archived groups that you've made in the past. Okay. Flipping over to the offers section, this is where you're really gonna prepare your offers for your instructors and get ready to send them out. So everybody's gonna come into this potential category or potential candidate category at first. And you can see here that some of these are green and some are gray. Green offers are ones that are ready to go. So you can always kind of scroll over the offers in this section, and it's going to give you kind of a glimpse into what you have down for everybody. You can click into them individually, and you can edit everyone's job offer. You do need to have a couple things in order to make a job offer. So you have to have a title, you have to have an employment type, a start and end date. And we do recommend putting wages in the system, but if you don't need to put wages in the system, maybe you pay in a different way, or this is an admin person that doesn't need to have a teaching wage, or perhaps you only use maybe teaching and training wages, you can just put those ones in, or you don't have to put any wages at all in the system. Once your offer is complete, it's going to turn green, and then you're ready to move it over to the ready to send section. I want to point out that there are a couple cool tools here on the side. So first, if you need to remove someone from a job group, if they got in touch with you early and they want to be in a different commitment level, you can remove them here. That's going to throw them back into the talent pool so that they're available to put in a new job group. You also have this copy previous employment button, which is really cool for returning staff. You can select different staff members, hit the copy previous employment, and it's going to pull up a prompt to be able to pull in that information from last year. And it's a great way to just kind of get started, get things from last year in the system so that you can make adjustments. You can do that either here or you can do that in the talent pool. I'll show you that in just a little bit. There is a really great and easy way to bulk update a lot of these fields, including the wages, the employment type, etc. Okay, so once we select someone, we approve their offer details. You can do this to one person or many at a time. And again, there's filters and sort to make it a little easier. You can also use this button here to pick the different job group if you're just working on one job group at a time. So once you approve the offers, they're going to move into this ready to send section. Here, you're going to be able to see the different wages. Again, you have a gear that you can kind of pull in whatever fields you want and you need to look at while you're doing this work. And you can see whether the offer is scheduled to go out or whether it's a manual send. So I am just going to select all three of these people and I am going to send out the offer. Now, if you want to unapprove the offer, you can do so and send them back to the potential candidate. Maybe you need to work on the offer a little bit more. From this stage, you can also remove them from a job group and again, reassign them to a new job group. And then we have an add hiring note tool here. So if you are doing your interviews at this stage and you're using Flaik for hiring, Flaik has a pretty cool tool within the employee profile. I'm going to switch to that over here. Okay, so we can see here in the hiring tab of the employee's profile that we have kind of a timeline of what's been happening in the hiring section, who's done each one of the tasks. So that can be really handy. We also have a summary of the offer information that they have that you've filled out, that you've kind of approved for them. You're also able to add hiring notes from a bunch of the different sections in the hiring section, and you can add one here as well. So just anything relevant that you need to know that you want to stick with this person. You can make a hiring recommendation during the interview process. And we also have this great space down here to be able to add hiring notes from the actual interview itself. And these will stay within the Flaik system and be available to you to view in historical data. All right, so we're ready to send these offers. I can kind of just send those out all at the same time, and everybody's going to move into this offer sent section. I'm going to be able to see when the offer was sent. I can actually see when the employees viewed the offer. I can view when the last reminder was sent. And this is a screen where I can actually send reminders automatically or send reminders manually. You are only going to be able to send one reminder a day. It has to do with just spam rules and filters. So, but you're going to be able to see the last time that you sent that offer. Again, you can pull in kind of whatever different columns that you'd like to here to be able to kind of view this information. And You also are going to see these new buttons kind of appear that are accept or decline offers. So this is for you as an admin to be able to accept or decline based on the contact from your instructor. So some people use an HR system, like an outside system from Flaik. And so they use the Flaik hiring tool as a great way to get data in and also track people as they're going through the hiring process. We actually have a new feature this year that allows you to use the Flaik hiring feature without sending offers out of Flaik. So if you want to do that, you can go over into the admin settings in the product settings, go down to this hiring setting here, and you're going to be able to flip off that little ticker that says send job offer emails. And then you'll be able to use the hiring process and move people through without actually sending the physical offer email. Okay, so I can accept or decline here based on these preferences. And I'm going to show you what it kind of looks like from the instructor's point of view if you approve or decline an offer. So when you accept an offer, it's just going to take you to a landing page that says, hey, we're glad you're joining us. We'll be in touch shortly to talk a bit more with you. And if you decline, you're going to get this box that is going to give you an opportunity to give a reason for declining. So I mentioned before that if you have people that want to change their commitment levels, you should put a prompt in the template to either get in touch with you before accepting the offer or to decline the offer, and use this text box here to say change commitment level or change to part-time, change to full-time. So just give your staff those instructions if you'd like some feedback there. All right, if you do have someone that accepts their offer and decides they want to change their commitment level, that's okay. They're going to move into the staff management section. Anyone that accepts their offer is going to move into staff management and officially be a staff member. If you don't care too much about the metrics in this job section, about everything here being correct, you can just leave them in staff management. You can change their employment type, which is their commitment level, and you're going to be all good there. But if you do want to make sure that all of this stuff is correct, what you're going to have to do is take them from staff management, drop them into the archive, and bring them back into the talent pool. You can then reattach them to the correct job group, and you can approve the offer for them or resend the offer for them to accept. Okay. All right, wait a second. There we go. So you also are going to be able to see that information here, the reason for declined, and you're going to be able to see all the people that accepted your offer as well in this section. All of these people, again, are going to have moved over into staff management, so you'll no longer find them in the talent pool. All right, going back to talent pool, I'm going to show you a really good way to get a lot of information into the system at once. So I can go to this bulk update candidates form. It's actually only going to do it for one person because I only had one selected, but I can select all the people. I'm going to hit bulk update candidates. I'm going to pull out the comprehensive template. This is the one that's going to have the wages and the job types in it. And I can pull that up and I can see a bunch of information on my employees. I can make changes here, and then I can also put in the wages, copy paste them from another document I might have, see different certifications, and just add different information to the system. Again, a great way to just kind of get everything set up at once. And then once you save that CSV file, you're going to drop it back on here. And you're going to be able to save it into the system, and all of your different instructors within the talent pool are going to update with that information. All right, guys, well, that is the hiring process. I'm going to hand it off to Steph to talk to you about availability.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, I'll just bring up my screen here and we'll jump into the availability feature. Great. So availability is a process generally done prior to the start of the season where your staff can actually submit their preferred calendar and make certain commitments that you have outlined in their employment agreement so that you're meeting your staffing needs while allowing your staff to request days off, choose their days of the week that they would like to have as their regular off days and things like that. So It's not actually submitting a schedule per se, because that would be in scheduling. It's really submitting their availability and their commitments. And then the scheduling part is a second step that is done by an administrator scheduler who can enter it in. And that's really the final approval process, is getting it, all of that information from availability into scheduling. So there are a few different times that you'd want to do availability, but generally prior to the start of the season, it's done before the first day of work. And so that needs to be done after the hiring process. As Emily was talking about the talent pool, staff actually need to move out of the talent pool and into staff management for you to be able to send out emails through the availability process. So they need to be in the staff management area of flaik. And then in this first screen, when you navigate to availability, you'll go into this little schedule icon on the left-hand navigation bar, and then down to availability, which is the second feature in this area. So in the first landing page, we'll get to the setup, and in this webinar, we'll discuss the initial setup, also the mail out of the actual calendars, and how you can manage responses. And I'll also show you how it looks for staff members to walk through the process as well. So in the main setup page, there is two sections here that you'll need to make sure are set up. There's calendars and availability groups. Calendars are really the basic structure for the calendar that is applied to your staff members, but you can actually set up different rules for different groups in availability groups. So calendars is the specific calendar and how it looks, and availability groups is more to do with the rules and how it applies to your staff members. So we'll start with the calendars. You can see that I have a couple in here, just two. So it is up to you how many calendars that you think you need, but generally we see two as for most resorts, but sometimes people use one to keep things really simple. The main reason that you want to set up a different calendar is because of different staffing needs or business levels. So for example, a lot of resorts would have different requirements for a ski instructor versus a snowboard instructor, because there are more ski instructors required on a given day. So if you'd like to set limits or set the actual number that you require and track that individually, then you'd want to set up a different calendar for that. Another reason is like the staff is at a physical different location. So similar reason being you have different staffing needs for a different physical location. So if you have different base areas that staff report to primarily, then you might want to have like a base 1 setup or base 2 setup. And then the final option, I guess, for a different calendar is like a different role within your department, or if you manage like a different subset of staff that are have a completely different job on the mountain. So for example, if you're managing childcare staff within flaik, you might want to set up a different calendar for them because they have different structure and requirements for the days. So that's kind of the breakdown of how you'd want to set up different calendars, and we'll go into how you'd set up an individual one. So I have the ability to go create a new calendar, but I'm going to actually select one of the calendars I have and click this duplicate calendar button, so it already has some of the fields input, and it will be a really great way to save some time if you have a really similar calendar and maybe there is just different limits on each one. So you want essentially the same structure and minor differences. This would be a good option for you. So this is the first setup screen of the availability calendar. Potentially, I would want to set up for childcare, like I said, so I'm going to change the title here. And then we have some advanced options as well that you can apply. So these are more contextual in this sense. So if you'd like to have an employment type that's related to that, so it could be, again, that commitment level that's also handled in availability groups. So up to you whether you'd like to identify that here. It's not a required field. You can also identify a discipline here just to help delineate between the calendars a little bit more, or you could just do so in the title as well. So those are optional. The mandatory fields here are the calendar start and end dates. This isn't necessarily aligned exactly with the start and end dates for your season or potentially maybe your admin staff, but for this calendar and the staff that are going to be attached to that calendar, when is the first day that they could possibly work or that you'd like to have them submit their preference to start work. So that would be the start date. And then again, the end date is the last day that you'd like them to submit their availability to work. And so I've set, in this example, mid-November to mid-April to give like that full season. Generally, availability is recommended to set up over the full season. That's going to be the easiest way to go about it. If you do have like a shorter time frame for availability that you'd like to set up, potentially reach out to us and we can talk about how that might work for your resort. So there are two different types of rules that would be set up for different calendars. And if you do need to like differentiate between different subsets of staff between these types of calendar rules, then you would want to make an additional calendar for that if you would separate like that. So we have days, which is actually going to be more of a quota system. For example, you'll create day types, which I'll show you in the next screen, and like holidays or peak days, and you'll assign a number of days that out of those day types that's required for a certain staff member. So potentially when they're signing up, you would set this as like 10, and you could set 10 require or minimum of 10 days required for peak days, and they would have to meet that requirement before they submit their schedule. The other way to set this up is the point system, and so points is actually more of a weighted system. So you can allocate a certain point value to each day type. So the minimum commitment for an instructor would be X number of points. And so it incentivizes them to sign up for higher point days to reach their required total. And that is another way that you can structure it. We definitely see most resorts set it up through the day system, and days will give you a little bit more flexibility in how strict your rules can be. So something to keep in mind there. Great. So there are some options along the way, just examples that will help guide you through this process as well. But again, feel free to reach out to us if you do have questions about any of this. Availability is probably the most customizable area of the site. And so there's a lot of options on how to set this up. So if you have a really specific requirement for your resort, please reach out to us and we can talk about how that might be accommodated through the system. So here are the day types on this screen that I was talking about. When you first go here, if you're creating a calendar from scratch, because I duplicated this one, the only day type that's going to be in here is standard days, and it will always be white. And so that's where the white squares are on the calendar here. But I've created several other custom day types. So holiday, mandatory days, peak days, and spring break days. And so a lot of times we see people do peak days and maybe non-peak days to emphasize and drive the behavior of people filling out the availability calendar to really sign up for the days where you need more staff, and less so on the days where you need less. And so that's why they're differentiated. So there is this mandatory day type that I've created as well. So this one, it has it's still just a custom day type, and I've named it mandatory, but what really makes it mandatory is this checkbox here below. So if you check mandatory workday on any of the day types that you create, anyone that's filling out their availability calendar will be automatically assigned those days. So they don't have to select them. It's just automatically applied to their calendar. They won't be able to unselect them unless they got in touch with you. And as an administrator, you were able to help them do that. So that's going to be an important one here. And then the last one that I wanted to mention is spring break days. So the reason that I've created this spring break days as an example is because we've seen in the past that some instructors try and get smart and front load their availability to meet their commitments early on in the season. And then they have a pass and they don't need to work for the rest of the season because they've met their commitment levels for employment. Through this process, if you create spring break days or maybe March or April days, if I go, you can set rules about how many days in busy times throughout the year that people are required to sign up for. So even if they met their commitment early on, but I created a rule that you needed like 5 spring break days, for example, they would still be required to work in March when it's busier. To add, we'll save that, and then to add a custom day type, you can just choose a name and then choose a color. So it's pretty simple. So if I would say non-peak days, for example, it'll always choose a color that you haven't selected already. And then I can just start, oops, I have to open it up. And then I can just select the items on the calendar that I'd like to apply for that. And so pretty simple to set this up. I can just go through the whole calendar and apply those, save, and you're good to go once you have your structure of the calendar complete. And so we'll move on to the next screen, which is really a forecasting tool or a tool to manage the limits that you have for each day. So there's the entire calendar here, and you can scroll through each of the days that are in the parameters of the start and end dates. And you can apply required staff and change the daily limit. You can also change the day type here if you had a specific day you needed to edit. You don't have to go back to the last screen. Just to point out, required staff isn't going to influence any of the behavior in the availability calendar as they are filled out by staff, but it does give you a reference point when you're starting to get responses to your calendars. And so you'll be able to see how many have signed up, for example, in this available staff here, the number that have responded, and be able to compare that to your target for your required staff. Daily limit, though, will affect the behavior of staff filling out the calendars. It will actually, if the limit has been met for the day, so a certain number of staff have filled up that meet that limit, then anyone filling out their availability calendar after the fact will not be able to sign up. There's some override rules that I'll show you in a minute, but that would prevent you from being overstaffed again on those less busy days if you wanted to put a capacity limit, and it will really put preference on those that fill out their availability calendar earlier. And if you fill it out late, it's too late, you've met the limit, and you'll have to choose a different day that there's more staffing needs. So that is all for calendars. We'll save that one, and then we have a couple availability groups here. So the reason that you'd want to set up different availability groups is based on applying different rules to a subset of staff. So it's mostly, as far as I've seen as examples, defined by the commitment level that they're having. So you'd want to treat full and part-time staff differently because they have different commitment levels. And so you can have less days that people sign up for in part-time and more for full-time. Another reason that you might want to set different availability groups is because you'd like to send out availability calendars at different times. So in each group, you'll have the ability to set when the availability is sent and control that. And so potentially, if you'd like to track your returning and your new hires differently, then you might want to create different availability groups for that. For example, the returning staff, you'd want them to have priority for filling out their calendar first. And so you can send the availability calendars to them through an availability group, keep a new hire group closed, or wait to send that until you're ready for the new hires to be sent out later. So once that is decided how many groups that you want, you'll start to set them up. So I'll go into edit availability group, or actually I'm going to duplicate this one again. So same as the calendar, you have the ability to duplicate to save time when you've already put in most of the settings, and there's small differences in the setup. So if I go into here, potentially I want to make one for new hires. And then we have the general details in this section for the availability group and what's going to apply to this set of staff. So you'll be attaching a group of staff to this particular availability group, and anyone in this group will have these settings applied to them when they fill out their calendar. So there are some advanced options here. More than the calendar, this will actually restrict who you can add to that group. So if you, again, only wanted full-time people as their employment type, you can define that here. Same with the primary teaching discipline. If this is an Alpine group, then you can define that here, and it will just make it a little bit easier to assign people to that group. But you can also do that manually. So again, an optional setting here. Now, there are two types of schedules that you can send out. One is much more simple than the other. So we have a regular week. So what a regular week will do when you send out the calendar is it will allow a person to select a number of days from a 7-day stretch. So Sunday to Saturday, they can choose a minimum number of days that you identify. So if you have your full-timers, for example, need to work 5 days a week, you can set 5, and they'll just choose 5 days of 1 week, and that will be duplicated across the season for their whole availability calendar. If you have identified mandatory days, for example, those will automatically apply to them as well. And then there's an option for like programs. If they select programs, that will be in addition to the regular week. So just a word of warning, if you have mandatory days like outside of the days that they were to select, then they would have more days assigned to them that week. And so just something to keep in mind if somebody's like, oh, I'm assigned for 6 days this week. Why is that? It might be because of a mandatory day or they signed up for a program. And then we have the irregular schedule. So the irregular schedule is much more commonly used. So this is done for many different types of availability groups, but will allow a little bit more flexibility, and the staff members are responsible for choosing individual days. So this will be more restricted by the rules that you set for day types, because you can like mandate that there is a certain number of days that they select for the day types, and that will be done more so in the irregular schedule. So there's a few I mentioned before, but there's a few ways that you can set overrides depending on how you'd like the behavior of this group to act with the availability process. And so the first one is enforce limits for the group. So again, limits are set in the calendar, and the calendar limit will affect all of the availability groups applied to that calendar unless you select this box. So potentially, if you'd like your full-time staff to have preference and be able to sign up for a day, even if the capacity has been met, then unselect this box and they will be able to do so. The second one is also concerning limits. So this is count this availability when enforcing limits. So let's take the example of the full-time group as well. So if you wanted to let people sign up, even if the limit has been met, but you wanted to count those people anyway, then you can have them be counted even though the limit doesn't apply to them. And then in subsequent waves of availability, then the full-timers would have taken up the spots, and the part-timers, for example, would still not be able to sign up because the limit has been met. So a couple different options there with limits. Then we have mandatory days. So there's a way to ignore mandatory days. If you wanted to apply mandatory days to some groups and not others, then you can use this checkbox to identify that preference. And then this next option is a new feature that's been introduced into the availability process. So this will allow you to turn off the ability for people to request leave. So we have in flaik what we call RDOs, or requested days off. And those are submitted through the availability process, where somebody can identify a reason that they would like to be off for the day. And so if you have a different process, or you don't allow days off to be requested by staff, and definitely not through this process, then you can go ahead and turn that off in the setting. The final piece is AM/PM shift time configuration. So in our admin settings webinar, we covered that in one shift type, you have the ability to set different times, which is the shift time configuration. So you have three options, like a full day, AM, PM, you can customize those. If you'd like the instructors in the availability process to choose which of those times is their preference, then you can select this box and they will be able to submit whether they could work in the morning or the afternoon, for example, on a given day. I want to point out when I talked about the day types, you can actually, or sorry, the calendar types being days or points, that would only apply to the days type. So if you do have a points calendar, this isn't going to be applicable. So just for the days/quotas structure in the availability process. And then the last setting on this page is to do with programs. So this is something that we've introduced this season, just a few days ago, actually, and this will allow you to assign which programs that you'd like to have somebody select, and it will automatically assign them to all of the days that are identified for that program. So we covered this a little bit last week in the admin settings webinar, but I'll just do a quick review. So I'm going to jump over into settings. And so to set up a program, so a multi-week program is what this is most suited for, but there's a few other reasons that you might be able to use it. This is going to be done in tasks. And then I've actually set up a scheduling area that is identified as programs. And then in here, you can set up the all the different programs that you have and the dates that they apply. So the main piece here that will recognize this in availability is the task type here. So this can be set to many different things, but if you'd like to use it in availability and set different dates for that program, then it must be identified as the task type program. And so this is where you identify all of the dates for that program. And if your staff member selects that program in the availability calendar, all of these dates will be automatically applied to their calendar, so they don't have to individually choose them and make sure that they aren't missing any. So there's all the potential programs that you could have set up in tasks. And then in the specific availability group, you can choose whether or not that would apply to this subset of staff. So if you have maybe like some higher level groups that wouldn't necessarily be available for new hires to sign up for, then you can remove that as an option. So I've gone ahead and selected all for this availability group. So the staff members would be able to check each of these or all of them, and all of those dates would be applied. Just as a disclaimer, again, this isn't scheduling them for those programs. It's really kind of submitting your interest in it, but ensuring that you are signed up for the days of those programs. In case you are selected for the program, you do need to commit to those days and be available for them. Great, so that is programs. And now we'll move on to rules. So in here, you'll get a summary of the calendar that you had set up. Again, this is set for each of the availability groups in that subset in the calendar. But this is where you can identify the different rules for this availability group specifically. So here I am working, I think, in the temporary, or we're doing like childcare, I think, but I can set up the minimum commitment that they need. So this is going to be over the whole season, how many days do you need to work? And then each day type, I can set an individual rule for. So when you first come into the availability setup, this is going to be blank, and you can add an advanced rule there and identify as many rules as you have day types. I think you can only apply one rule to one day type. The parameters around here are minimum, maximum, or exactly X number of days for that day type. So for example, here I put maximum of 10 standard days for those less busy days. So if I want to ensure that this group of staff doesn't choose too many of the days where we don't need as many staff. And then I've put on the busier days, minimum of X number of days, so that they have to sign up for at least that number of days in order to submit their calendar in availability. And so the final piece in this section is an explanation for staff. After this, we'll go through the different actual templates in the emails. So you have a few different opportunities to put all of the rules and explanations for this fairly complicated process. So you can, I recommend, just repeating it as many times as possible. So it's the process is as smooth as possible. This one specifically, I'll show you in a moment, but when they fill it out, it's actually like a click here link, and it will open up all of the details that you submit here. So a few different places for that. And then we'll get into the email send out. So for there's a couple options on how you can schedule your mail outs for your availability process. If you are new to this process and you've never done it before, I do recommend doing a manual send out first. So you can choose no, I don't want to schedule the first wave of requests. And when I add people to the group, or I can manually send out to those that I'd like to. That's just to ensure that you aren't sending any emails out prior to you being ready. If I choose yes, then I can schedule that date, and I can also submit a deadline for the availability calendar. So there is a hard or soft deadline here. The soft deadline is going to allow people to submit after the deadline has passed, and the hard deadline will prevent people from submitting after that date, and we'll have to contact you to submit their schedule. And then we do have some reminders as well in here. So then this other availability waves is potentially if you needed to like add people into the group, if they got hired late or something, you could add them into the group after the fact. They can go in the same process. They don't have to go with the first set of groups. So that would be this other availability waves, or if you're doing it manually, the settings are determined here. We do send out reminders with keeping in mind that there are some like spam rules of how much you can email people and how regularly. So we have a maximum of 2 reminders that you can send. And then there's also a deadline reminder. So it will remind them that the deadline is approaching, and that will be up to 5 days before the deadline is identified, again at the top bit here. And so really the like least that you could do is 2, and then you can also do 3 if you'd like. There's a way to manually send reminders as well, and I'll show you that in a bit here. And then the final setup pieces here are going to be the email templates. So we have automatically set a template for you. So it will kind of explain the flake process as we've designed it. But if you have special considerations or a special process that you'd like to identify here, then you can change this as you'd like. Again, there's mail merge here. And I recommend that you be as detailed as possible about the rules that you've set in kind of each email that you create too. So it's just repetitive and they can see the rules in multiple different places. There is an option for a test email here. So you can send that to any email that you'd like prior to sending the availability groups out, but you are going to see the preview as well, and again, desktop or phone view, so you can see what the email is going to look like prior to sending that test email. Great. We have a different template for reminder email, just for slightly different wording. Again, that's that second email that they would receive would be the reminder email. And then test email here as well. And then the final one is going to be your cover letter. So the cover letter is, the email includes a link to follow to complete your availability process. And then the actual availability is submitted through a web page on the browser. And so they'll follow the link and then they'll reach this first cover letter, and that'll be the first thing they see after they follow the link. So this is like a really great place again to reiterate the rules and explain how the process is going to go. No test here because it's not actually an email, it's in the web page itself. And so that is all for the setup. And so once we're in and have completed our setup and we have things as we'd like to go, it's going to be closed at first, your availability group, again, to prevent you from sending emails when you're not ready to. So you will need to open the availability group. So you can just select the availability group through that checkbox, and then on the right side, open availability group. Prior to moving on, just really quickly, I do want to show you what it looks like for a points calendar. So for this snowboard calendar, I've selected points. The days that you set up are still day types, but you set a point value for each day type. And then in the availability group, you're setting like the minimum points required. And then you can set the also rules applying to that day type. So it's kind of a combined calendar with points and day types, but the points are going to be that commitment level that will ensure that they're submitting what is required. So that's all that's going to be different with points. And then you're ready to send out your availability requests. So first, you will need to attach staff to availability groups. So anyone that you see in kind of the columns in MailOut are already already attached to an availability group. If you don't see anyone here, you need to add new people. There's this button, add staff to availability group. Anyone who is not assigned to an availability group already in the talent pool will show up here. Sorry, we're in staff management. It's in the staff management. And you can select them in bulk and add them to availability groups. So I'll add them, say, snowboard full-time. and then they'll move into ready to send. Once you're ready to send, you need to make sure that the group is open. So you need to go that in the last page, and then you can send out by selecting, and then there's this send availability request button here. So once they have been sent, you'll be able to track them in the sent column, and there is a request sent date and a request viewed date. So this is going to be when they open the email, and then last reminder sent. Also in this page, you have the ability to send a reminder to them. And then any of these columns, you actually can remove a person from an availability group as well. So if you need to reset somebody's availability process, if they filled it out wrong or something, you can clear their availability, and I'll show you that in a minute, but you can also remove them from availability group and move them around so that they can resubmit in the correct group. Before we go in and discuss responses, I'm actually going to show you how it looks to a staff member to select their availability calendar. So I've followed the link from my email, and again, this is the cover letter page that's going to give that initial outline of the process, and then they'll be able to see this full page, which is the main content here, where they'll get a summary of all of their rules. Again, there's this click here to learn more about the process, so you can put more details in there. It will outline the day types and the commitment levels that you need for each of those. So prior to filling out the calendar, they have the option to choose programs that they are interested in. So if they want, say, Super Slider Saturdays, then they can select that, check that program there, and it's going to apply all of the dates of the program to their calendar without having them being required to select the dates individually. And then from here, it's just a process of choosing the dates in order to meet the requirements. So they'll just go through and select the dates that they're available, come back up, make sure that they have met their commitment, and then they'll be able to submit. So really checking here that they've met all their dates, and they're, oh, I haven't done any spring break dates. Again, there's that piece to make sure that they're going all the way down and filling out the whole season. And then sure, a couple days in April. And now they've met all of the days, they're over their commitment level, they've met their rules, they would be able to submit. So they can go, oh, have I not done all of them? Oh, maximum of 10 days, standard days. I caught myself off. Great, so now they're under 10 days. So again, if they haven't met any of the particular rules, it will prevent them from submitting their calendar. So now that next button is ready to go. And in this screen, they can request leave. So I've already put some in here, but it's pretty simple. You just select a day, say they're doing a certification that day, and they can request that off for you, and you'll see that in responses. The final screen just shows a summary. It'll show all the days they've agreed to, the days off that they've requested, and then the programs that they've signed up for. And after the review, they can submit, and that will go into the responses setting. So as you can see, it's got an updated response, and I can go and see, that was Bugs Bunny filling it out there, that they have now completed that today. Before I move to responses, really quickly, I'll show you the regular calendar. So in here, there is the 7-day work week. You can still set programs. So if I select a program, again, it will apply all of those Saturdays of that program automatically. But here I can go ahead and say I would like to have Wednesday, Thursdays off. That will be repeated for the entire season. So that one's pretty simple. There'll be a request day off and review page as well, but that's the main difference there. So in responses submitted, this is really a way to like track the email and when those things were submitted, but to see what actual calendar availability calendars and commitment levels that staff are submitting, you'll go into this tab responses. And so you can see that there's quite a few that have filled it out already. I can toggle through the different dates and see all of the days that people have agreed to and their day types. You have those requested day offs as in here as well. And if you hover over them, you can see the reason for the requested day off. And then there's a few different ways to like arrange your screen in this view. So there is this main button here is going to allow you to look at the responses from specific availability groups or in specific calendars. There's filters that can be applied here if you'd like to just view a certain subset of staff. And then there's the ability to sort your staff as well. Again, by like priority, response, things like that. And then in here, an admin also has the ability to update or submit an availability calendar for a staff member. So if I wanted to like change one thing, if a staff member gets in touch with you and they have submitted an error or something that they didn't mean to, you can go ahead and select and go edit availability. And then you can toggle through and change the dates. The one thing that's different here is, so there is the mandatory days that would be auto assigned when a person has submitted it from the instructor experience side of things. But when you're in this admin view, you can actually deselect mandatory days. So if somebody really needed it off, you would be able to do that in here. And then you can go ahead and change your schedule as you need. The program options are in here as well. And then there's the like list of mandatory days at the bottom here. So really similar to the process I just showed you, but you'll be able to do this for any staff. Maybe if they don't have access to a desktop or something to fill this out, you can do it on your phone. But if they're having trouble with the process, you can do it for them to get their schedule in. Similarly, if like the availability process is closed and they're blocked out because it's a hard deadline, you'd be able to submit their availability for them in this way. A couple other menu items on the right here, you can send a reminder for them out of here. So the green circles are those that have submitted, and then those that haven't are have the red circles around them. So you could send them a reminder from here, send the availability request initially, add a supervisor note, and then email, as you see in most of the features of Flaik. One final piece before we close out the webinar today is I'm just going to show you what happens when it moves over into the schedule. Again, availability process is kind of like contained, and it is really a one-way path to scheduling. So this is you requesting a preferred schedule from your staff members and their commitment levels. And then when you actually schedule them, you are submitting their final schedule, and that's when they can start to be assigned tasks and things like that. So I'm going to move over into scheduling here, and I'm kind of in a blank season. So this is if you haven't done any scheduling yet and you've just finished your availability process, it should look something like this. So the actual days that an individual has committed to are represented by these white squares here. And so that is how you're going to know that they have agreed to that day. It again doesn't mean that they've been scheduled for that day. You will need to go in and schedule them, but you can do it pretty easily in bulk here. So I will cover this in more detail and some tricks on how to do this quickly, but just to show you, to get you started today, I can choose a shift here. I could go ahead and select all staff members, and then this auto schedule selected will come up, and I have the ability to bulk schedule all of the days that people have committed to. And then, you know, from there you can make minor changes if you needed to update the schedule or something wasn't approved, but that's a really quick way to do it. So again, that was a lot. So please, you know, if you do have questions for us, we'll go into our Q&A section will cover what questions have already been entered. But if you do have any remaining questions, please get those in there now, and we'll cover it off in the Q&A section right now. Great.
Cool. Thanks, Steph. We have a couple great questions in here. I was just about to type the answer to one from Brian Allen. He asked, can you send multiple availability calendars to the same instructor? For instance, a trainer who is also a supervisor. So by design, you're not able to send an availability calendar or send one instructor multiple availability calendars. This is for reasons having to do with making sure that people aren't double committing. So committing to be both a ski or a snowboard instructor at the same time, committing to work at one base level or another. I do understand the case in which using a calendar for training would be useful, but the other reason is that within the scheduling screen that Steph showed you, really the availability is just those white underlying boxes that help you fill in the schedule easily, and there's not really a lot more data than that. So that is how it is right now. We can talk to you a little bit further about what might be best for getting your availability from your trainers. Cool. Got a couple other questions in here too. Let me kind of sort through them. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask one live. Let's see. Sarah asked, I think we covered this, but just to make sure, from the point of view of the instructor, is there anything that prompts them to double check all the dates outlined so they can see what they've selected? So yes, there is the season summary page at the end after they've filled in their calendar and their RDO so that they can see everything all at once, see their numbers, their commitment and stuff. And there's also a back button there so that if they need to go back and change something before doing the final submit, they can do so. All right, let's see. With required staff and daily limits, can we go in and see and set those after instructors have started to fill out the calendars? Yes. So the required staff and daily limit for the availability calendars are optional fields. You don't have to have them in at all. And at any time you can go in and put them in or edit them. So if you've reached your daily limit on a particular day, but it's a really, really popular day, you can set it a bit higher. You can lower it if you're not seeing the business come in that you need. You won't be able to lower it. If you already have a certain number, you won't be able to lower it and unless you take people out of that particular day, but that's kind of the only caveat there. Let's see. Couple great suggestions in here. In Talent Pool, can we create custom filters for the hiring section? So Steph pointed out that the filters right now are set, but we are working on an update to allow you to customize and save your own filter sets for the future, for the first part of the season. Cool. Sarah asked, if we have staff who are returning after a year or more off, what's the best way to pull them through into being hired? So staff that are took a year off are probably going to be in your archives section. So you're going to go in there, you can just select them. It's going to have a button that says restore profile, and it'll give you two options. You can either pull them into the hiring feature, which is the talent pool, or you can pull them directly into staff management from there. Cool. There's a couple suggestions. Oop, I think there's a new one here too. Yeah, a couple different suggestions for features and a couple questions that we'll make sure to follow up on with you guys a little later. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar today. We'll send out a reminder for the next webinar, and we'll also put this recording up on the website in the flaik knowledge base on Monday, so you can share it with your team. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, everybody.